Hello, I'm Steph from iDriver Classic, and today we are taking a massive leap back in the history of automotive, and we are looking at a Ford Model A from 1929. Now, a lot of younger people today might look at this and not be too familiar with the Ford Model A, but by the end of 1929, over 2 million of these have been sold across the world, which makes it a car firmly planted in that classic box. Now, in today's video, because I'm sure that many of you have never got up close and personal with a Model A before, we're going to look under the bonnet, we're going to look inside the cabin, we're going to look in the back, and I'm going to show you the hidden seats, and then something that I'm absolutely terrified about, we are going to take her out for a test drive. But first of all, let's kick off with a walk round and I'll talk you through the history. By the time the Model A came to fruition, Ford had already had an enormous triumph, which of course was the Model T. So making sure the Model A was not only just as good, but better, was quite a tall order. Now, the new car was aimed at not only the emerging world of motorists across the globe, people buying their first car, but the Model T driver who wanted something a bit more modern, and Ford recognised the challenge and created an entirely new car. And in fact, a bit of a geeky fact for you is when you look at the American cars, there are no parts shared between the T and the A. Now, I'm not sure if that's the same for all the Model A's across the globe, but that is true for the American variants, which of course made this new car an incredibly exciting and modern prospect. And in fact, Henry Ford described the evolution of the A, so new for the company, he likened it to wiping the slate clean and starting over again. The car launched in the winter of 1927, I think it was around December, and production had begun in the October for the American buyers. And essentially the public went wild. And can you believe that over 10 million people went to see the new car in the first week? And the public gatherings were so excitable that the police were called to help keep the calm and keep the traffic flowing around all the tens of thousands of people that were turning up every single day. I just don't think that we can compare that to anything launching today. It must have been absolutely unbelievable. However, despite getting it so right with the design, because they really did, everybody loved it, Ford did have a small hiccup. They hadn't quite anticipated the volume of sales coming in, and the new Rouge manufacturing complex was behind on orders and behind on manufacturing targets until the middle of 1929. And that's when the line was at full capacity, and at that point they were churning out, I think it was around 9,000 cars per day. And the new car was really designed for not only the motorist who wanted something to compete with things coming out from GM and other car manufacturers, but also things like the new roads that were being built, because the new roads didn't need that rugged T. They could go for something a little bit more refined. And so for the American buyer, they were given the 3.3 engine, and that was achieving around 65 miles per hour at top speed. And that's around 40 brake horsepower, I believe, which was very decent for the time. And if you think about how enormous America is, it allowed motorists a considerable range of travel. And the engine was paired with a fully crashed 3-speed sliding gear manual box, and that also had reverse on it as well. If you're wondering what the rest of the setup is, it's rod brakes on these and drums all round. And it's worth noting that if you're watching this in England, you might think it's slightly strange that it's got the 3.3 engine. If you're watching in America, you probably won't. Now, the reason it might be quite strange if you're British is because the 3.3 engine wasn't a common sight in Britain. And the British cars were mainly fitted, unless otherwise specified, and it would have been a special order, with the 2043cc engine, which had a horsepower of 28. Now, you might be wondering why they've done this, because of course Ford's having great success with that 3.3 engine. Well, the British taxation system at the time was related to the fiscal horsepower of the car, and for each fiscal horsepower there was a £1 per annum charge to be paid in tax. So if Ford had gone for that 3.3 instead of dialing it down to that 2043cc engine, it really would have pushed the tax on the car up, and therefore made it quite an unattractive prospect for the majority of the buyers. So that decision to bring it down quite a few notches was commercial, driven by local government policy. Now, overall, this meant that Ford in Europe didn't sell quite as well as they did in America. If it wasn't obvious, well, here it is. It's because they weren't marketing a like-for-like project, and that smaller engine really did hamper the appeal. But that's not to say they didn't sell well, because after a blinding launch in the December of 1927, production ended in March 1932. It's quite a small amount of time, but can you believe they sold over 4.8 million of the Model A worldwide? And now, where are we nearly 100 years later? Well, here's the thing. It must have been a really great car because it's still a huge favourite of many people across the globe. And there are even cars which are still in regular use as daily or regular drivers. There are show cars, there are hot-rodded motors, and there are Ford Model A variants across the world. And remember, they were made absolutely everywhere, from Spain and Turkey, the UK, America, Argentina, Brazil, Canada. Everywhere you go, there was a Model A. It really was a worldwide car. It was then succeeded by the Model B, which, in my opinion, hasn't got quite the appeal, but that's purely subjective. Now let's show you a little bit more around this dash and show you how to get her started up. Coming inside here, I feel marginally more nervous than when I was filming outside because I'm edging ever closer to the point that I start driving her. And this feels like quite a tall order because it's so alien compared to what I'm used to. However, we're going to give it a good go. Now, first of all, let me walk you through this dash, which is incredibly simple. So over on the left-hand side, we've got an aftermarket little panel from the T-Service company. Coming into the centre here, just above there, you've got these indicators. Now, these are very cleverly fitted. So this is an aftermarket panel that's been put in, and I'm quite a purist at heart, but when it's something like this, putting indicators into a car that doesn't have them, I wholeheartedly back it, because I think something like that is very safety conscious. It's a very smart decision. And the indicators actually sit within the main headlights at the front and then slightly separate at the back. But the idea is there's not more holes drilled into the body. It's all cleverly crafted into what's there. In my opinion, it's the most sympathetic and ingenious way to get indicators to sit within the car without harming the real look of the vehicle. Coming into the centre here, this is far more original. So as you can see here, you've got the ignition, you've got your fuel gauge, you're coming down into your interior light, you've got your speedo, and you've got your amp meter. Now look, Claire's not had this car very long, and also she is a very old lady, the car, not Claire. And the fuel gauge and the speedo aren't currently working. She's been fiddling about with them, doing her best, but do you know what she prioritised? And I think this is such a good lesson for people at home, is she thought about safety. So she thought about things like making sure the indicators were working right. She's done a load of wiring, she's replaced a load of the rubber hosing under there, and she said, you know what, she said, a fuel gauge can wait, but something like that, all the wiring under the bonnet, she said, Steph, that's what's really important. And she apologised to me, and I said, no, Claire, I said, every classic car is a work in progress. I don't think they're ever done. So no, you won't see those working on test today, but you know what they are. Now, the next thing is we're going to talk about how to start this car. Now, Claire has helpfully made a little sticker up here which reads battery, fuel, ignition, choke and starter. So that gives us a bit of a hint on what we need to do to get it going. Now, there's a battery cut-off switch which we're going to check down here. So Claire's not turned that off for now. And then down here you've got your fuel tap. Very helpfully, someone's actually drawn a little arrow on to show us where it is. Let me get that on, twist that round. God, you need some energy for these. So we've got our fuel tap on, so we've got battery, fuel, ignition, so we switch that to on. We've got the choke. Now you pull the choke out, and within 2 revolutions you need to push that back in. And then we've got the starter, which is this one just down here. Claire said to me earlier, she went, you've got to be a bit of a ballet dancer to get this right. I would say more octopus, because I feel like I need hands, legs, arms, eyes everywhere. Now, I've also been warned that she doesn't always want to start first time. Come on, come on. Hey, we've got lift off. Should we go for a drive? Should we do it? Let's be brave. I'll let you have a listen from the back first. Right, let's go on an adventure. Okay, I'm only mildly nervous, so we're all right. It's certainly very different to anything I've ever experienced before. But one of the things that I will tell you is that it's not the steering, which I think sometimes people would think that it's hard to get my head around. It's this difference between the accelerator, brake and clutch. It's making you really have to think as you drive along. Now I'm going to just try and come down into first gear for this. Oh. Oh. Now as I sit here like an octopus trying to move everything round, you realise just how talented. Oh my goodness. Getting my head around this accelerator and brake is tricky indeed. For the first time in my life, probably to the relief of some people, I am lost for words. This is like nothing else I've ever experienced before. Number one, it's exhilarating. Number two, it's terrifying because I have to keep thinking not only about my road positioning, as you would do naturally, and all the other things that you would have to do on a drive. I'm also having to think about where my blinking feet are, because I keep wanting to put my foot naturally where the brake pedal is, because that's where the accelerator would be on my car at home. It's not like driving at all. But I can totally see why people get into these pre-wall cars. Because as I come along here, my hat flying off my head, blinking back on the wind that's flying through the windscreen, this is one of the most fun driving experiences I have had in years. And you know what? With all the boring stuff that we have to do in life, there's not a lot of fun left to be had always. But coming out on the road, I reckon I'm not even doing 30 miles an hour. And my goodness, it's all the fun of a fun fair, but you're controlling everything that's going on. And once you start to get your head around anyway, where that accelerator and where the brake is, it's actually not as tricky as you first think. The other thing that I would add is that with that 3.3 under the bonnet, I did have a feeling that it might have a little bit more life in than you might expect, but it's certainly not as wheezy as people make out these pre-wall cars to be. It might not be wheezy, but I tell you what, with this screen up, it's definitely windy. I really wish I'd worn my glasses actually, instead of going without them. Not for visibility, but just for a bit of cushioning from the wind coming through that front screen. Now if you are looking at one of these, I would say to you that don't be put off by people telling you that it's really difficult to drive, because once you start getting into that driving experience, it's actually not too tricky at all. So as we come down into second gear, it takes a wee bit to get your head into, and I know everybody else say double D clutch, but trust me, even though I've done a lot of double D clutching in my life, it feels like some of that just goes out your head as you're trying to think, where are my feet on the pedals and all the rest of it. But you know what? Remember the first day that you started driving, and remember how difficult that was. It's not as difficult as that. It's just learning a new skill. Don't be put off by the fact that it's a slightly different experience to some of the more modern cars that you're used to. Now I'm just approaching this junction with trepidation because I am on rod brakes here, and I like to just brake into it. So rather than just putting my foot squarely down on the brake, I like to be able to feel my way into things. Now that's back down into first gear. Now of course here is your advance and retard, and you need to move this. Go. Give that a little bit of hand throttle as well, and it just gives her a wee bit more gusto to be going along with. And I tell you what might have helped there, if my foot wasn't on the brake. Oh goodness me, I feel like I'm going mad. It is a good laugh though. There we go. Now I'm finding it very easy to change up through the gears. It's when you come to changing down that it's a little bit more tricky. Now if you're wondering, by the way, what that rattling is, you've got floorboards beneath you, wooden floorboards, and I think they might be slightly loose because Claire's been adjusting everything. So please do just block that out as we go along. Now I think that I've probably raised my own blood pressure quite enough for one day, so I'm going to hand the keys back to Claire and say to her good luck, because she has bought this incredible Model A to go out racing in over this summer. She's going to do Race the Waves and other things, and you know what, good luck to her, good luck to Bush, because what an incredible bit of kit to be doing it in. But for me, I think I'm going to go for something far more modern and jump back in my Morris Minor. Now that's it from me today. I hope you've enjoyed this very different experience. But until next Sunday, take care and drive safely.